待ってください、ミネさん。何か様子がおかしいですわ。姉ちゃん。そんな、遅すぎたのですね。
Hello everybody, and welcome to this video looking at a new JRPG. It is always a good week when there's a new one of these to play, and this week we are looking at Star Varnir, which comes to us from Idea Factory, the super niche and yet super popular JRPG house behind the likes of Hyperdimension Neptunia, Fairy Fencer, Death's End Request, and God knows how many other titles. It is a very prolific studio to say the least, and this is their latest one. This is a completely new title. It doesn't belong to any other franchise. It's a new IP, it's a new idea, and it is a good one. It's actually a really enjoyable game. I like it a lot. So this video is to look at some of the reasons that I find this one really interesting, and why I think it's well worth your time. So, if you were to take Grimm Brothers and Idea Factory and mush them together, you probably would have Star Varnir. It is very much inspired by the fairy tale narrative tradition, and it is all about witches and dark forests and innocence lost and dragons and all of that kind of stuff, magic, and it's a very fairy tale inspired game, and it's actually surprising to me that Idea Factory has taken so long to really indulge that fairy tale aesthetic in a video game, because we haven't really seen that from this studio before, and yet it's so fitting. You know, fairy tales are all about that kind of high magic and the kind of the simple storytelling, the very basic ideas that it kind of drives home in a very unsubtle way, which is what Grimm Brothers is all about. Idea Factory is always about that itself, and it's surprising that it has taken so long for the studio to indulge this, but it has turned out really well. This is a really compelling story. It has great characters. Each and every single one of these characters is really interesting and engaging. And while I know Idea Factory, Compile Heart, whatever you want to call them, while I know that this studio is not exactly known for subtle, nuanced characters, and it's usually attributed to fan service and boob jokes, this game kind of has that meld of the two, and it's a little bit like the previous Idea Factory game in that regard. Death's End Request also had the fanservice-y elements in there in spades, to be honest, but it had a much more interesting narrative with much more interesting characters as well. This game is very much like that as well. It kind of defies a lot of the stereotypes you would expect for witches, and if I was to tell you Idea Factory plus witches, you probably have an idea in your head, if you played enough Idea Factory games, about what to expect from from Star Varnir. But this game has a way of defying those expectations, and I found these characters really fascinating, really engaging, and I wanted to learn lots more about them as I was playing along. Every time a new character joined the party or showed up, I was interested immediately in what they were about. They're gorgeously drawn. Like, Idea Factory has always had very talented artists. I mean, Tsunako, the artist behind the Hyperdimension Neptunia series, has always been on staff. They've always had very talented artists, but they've really outdone themselves with this one. The characters are gorgeous. The environments are actually quite impressive as well. Idea Factory games are always built on a very intense budget. They're very, very, very budget titles. But the artists have this way of getting the most out of what they've got to work with, and this is the case with this one too. It's a simple aesthetic, like the environments are simple, as you can see from this footage, but they are really interesting and vibrant and colourful, and it's all just done very well. This is a really well made JRPG from Idea Factory, and it really shows that this studio, which had previously been dismissed by everybody for just pushing out very cheap JRPGs, this studio is really starting to hit that very much that next level, and it's becoming a mid-tier JRPG developer, and it's doing some really impressive stuff. The other thing that is so great about this game, and I never got sick of it, I never got bored of this, is the combat system. I found it so engaging from start to finish. And again, Idea Factory has been known for putting together cheap and fairly clunky combat systems where fans even kind of sit through them because they're enjoying the rest of the game. But with Death's End Request and now Star Varnir, the studio is again showing it is pushing up into a much higher tier that we haven't seen from it before, and that's exciting and interesting. Now, Star Varnir's combat system is really great because it takes place on 3 planes. So basically, every character in every fight has the effective ability to fly. It's a little bit surreal seeing dragons that don't have wings flying, or other monsters that don't have wings kind of moving up and down. But once you get over that, because it's more about the tactics that this enables, there's actually 3 planes of combat. So there's a top level, a middle layer, and a lower level. And characters can move up and down from those levels. Some attacks can only attack the one level, other attacks can hit every level. And you can also push your opponents around if you've got the right attacks. So if you organize things well, you can actually hit an opponent into another opponent, which does heaps of damage and will really help you. It's a very tactical combat system, and it's really enjoyable. If you were to just think about 3 kind of layers of a JRPG in 3 different levels, all kind of going on at the same time, you'd have a similar view to what this combat system offers. And it just makes every skill useful, because sometimes you will only need a skill on the one plane, other times you'll need a skill that hits everything, and you'll need to make sure that your characters are balanced so that you've got a good range of skills, not just the elemental attributes of those skills, but also the spatial use of those skills. And that really keeps the combat varied, because in every battle you're going to need to approach it in a different way. This isn't the hardest game out there. Even the boss battles are not going to ruin you if you're fairly confident and familiar with JRPGs, but the strategy that's involved with it is always interesting. Even if you're never really facing a game over screen, the tactical nature of the combat system is just something you want to use, and it's great. Characters also acquire skills in a really interesting way that fits completely with the thematics and the narrative of the game. So in order to acquire skills, your characters have to devour their opponents. All of the opponents are basically dragons. They're variations of dragons. Some are less dragon-like than others, but every monster is kind of built around this thematic concept of a dragon. And your characters need to eat dragons in order to stay alive. That's what witches have to do. So in this game, they acquire skills by devouring the dragons, which basically works out at a percentage chance. Just like in Pokemon or Dragon Quest Monsters or any of those kind of collectible games, you need to weaken a monster to a point. Once you've got it weak enough, you've got a pretty high chance of devouring it if you use a specialized devour skill. If you miss, then it doesn't do much damage and you can be at a slight disadvantage. But if it hits, you get to devour the creature, and then you get to use its core. That core gives your character additional skills. So you need to do a lot of party management in this game. You need to make sure that each of your characters that you've got in combat are devouring different dragons and collecting their cores, because once you devour a dragon, the other characters don't get that core. So if you want a well-balanced party, you have to make sure that all of the characters are doing this devouring stuff. And that's, again, another layer of tactics that you need to engage with, and the strategy of the game is, again, quite deep. And it's just fascinating to watch all play out, because it's well-balanced, it's enjoyable, it keeps you on your toes, it makes sure that there's no single battle scene where you just kind of go through the motions, because you're always thinking about what you need to get out of the combat system. So it's interesting. The final main element of the combat system is possibly my one criticism of Star Varnir. That is that each of the characters, through combat, builds up a special meter. When that meter fills, they turn into a super powerful version of themselves. We've seen it before in a lot of Idea Factory games. Basically, it's an excuse for Idea Factory to really fan service things up, because as the characters get more powerful, they generally lose clothes, and in this one is no exception. They really do strip down when they get powered up, which is a great visual effect, to say the least. But the one issue with it, I guess, the one issue with this combat system, and that particular element in it is that you don't actually get to control when the character does this. As soon as the power meter is built up, they immediately transform. And that's a little bit disappointing because there's more than a few times, plenty of times, a lot of the time, I would waste those kind of power-ups because my character would turn into their superpowered version when there was only one enemy left and it was nearly dead. So having no control over that does fit thematically in with what the game's about, because mental instability is a big part of the narrative of Star Varnir, without giving too much away. Characters have to constantly contend with the risk of going insane and all that kind of stuff. So it fits thematically that you wouldn't have control over that transform process, but mechanically it is a bit of a letdown, especially when you're right before a boss and you've just accidentally reset all your characters to basically being, needing to do a lot of combat to build up their special meters again, and you kind of needed those specials to deal with the boss. That's a little bit of a issue, I guess, with the game. It's a small issue. It doesn't really stop you from playing or enjoying the game, and certainly it's a great fun to mess around with the characters when they are in their powered up state. It just would have been nice to be able to choose when to, or have some kind of control over when that ability would activate. But that really is such a minor issue, and it didn't get in the way of me enjoying this game on any level, because I really, really do love Star Varnir. I think this is a great JRPG. This is a great example of how a JRPG can be constructed, and how a game on a budget can be done in a way that's interesting and original, and gives even the die-hard fans something new to look at. And I think one thing that with Idea Factory that people often dismiss or don't really pay attention to is that this studio is always trying to do things differently. It doesn't always have great budgets, and it doesn't always have its ideas executed as well as you might like, but it does always try. It's always looking for a unique angle. It's always looking for a different way of showing combat. It's always looking for a way to better tie the combat of a turn-based JRPG with the narrative that it's telling. And these things I don't think the studio gets enough credit for, and that's unfortunate because it deserves a lot of credit for them. And I think that with games like this one, and I suspect that this one will actually rate pretty well even on Metacritic, I think that the studio is really starting to get a grasp of what it's trying to do with JRPGs, and I think it's starting to deliver some really interesting experiences. So definitely get Star Varnir. I've got a review coming up on digitallydownloaded.net as well, but it's going to be a very positive one, I can assure you of that. And I highly recommend this game to everybody that likes JRPGs. It is fan servicey. It has all of those kind of Idea Factory elements in it, and if fan service puts you off, there will be an element of that will be uncomfortable for you in this game. But that's not what this game's all about anymore. That's not what Idea Factory is all about anymore. It's about a much broader kind of experience, and I definitely think that this is one that will surprise a few people if they give it a go. So thanks very much for watching this video. I hope it was interesting. As always, I ask or beg at the end of my videos, please do consider backing me on Patreon if you enjoy what I'm doing. I want to do a whole lot more of it. I need supporters to do that, so please do. You can also subscribe to the channel and get all the videos as I do them. I do try and do them fairly frequently these days. And other than that, please do read the review of Star Varnir once it goes up on digitallydownloaded.net. Thank you very much for your time, and we will see you at the next video.